He was rushing past a street violinist until one woman made him stop. And what happened next changed his life in ways he never expected. But before we begin, let me ask you, where are you watching from right now? Share it in the comments. All right, let's step into the heart of New York City, where this unforgettable story unfolds. New York City, a place where millions of lives move quickly, where dreams are built and broken every single day. The streets are crowded, filled with hurried footsteps, honking cars, and people chasing time. Yet, in the middle of all this noise, sometimes something unexpected happens. Something that makes the world slow down. On one chilly evening, as the sun dipped low behind Manhattan's towers, a street violinist stood at a busy corner. His music drifted above the chaos, haunting and beautiful, a melody that made strangers stop in their tracks. Adrian Hale was one of them, a tall, striking man in his late 20s, dressed sharply in a suit that told the world he was successful. He was a rising star in New York's finance world, admired for his ambition and confidence. But inside, Adrian felt a restlessness he could never quite explain, an emptiness that success alone could not fill. Across the street, another passerby had stopped. Serena Vaughn. She carried herself with a grace that seemed effortless. With her golden hair and deep blue eyes, she looked like she belonged in a painting. Serena worked as a freelance illustrator, living by her art, following her heart rather than a strict plan. She moved through life with creativity and faith in moments, not schedules. Both strangers, both standing still, drawn by the same music. The violinist's song reached them, but it was their eyes meeting that created something neither expected. Just a glance, just a flicker of connection in a city where people rarely notice each other. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was enough to stir something unspoken between them. In that fleeting moment on a crowded New York street, the seeds of a story began, one that would change the course of both their lives. Adrian Hale's life looked flawless from the outside. He was the man people envied, the polished professional, the rising star of New York's financial world. His morning started early. His suits were tailored, his stride confident. He shook hands with power, signed deals that made headlines, and moved through boardrooms like someone born to conquer them. But behind the expensive watch on his wrist and the sharp smile he carried into every meeting, there was a man who never felt at home in his own success. Adrian worked in a high-rise office where the glass windows stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a skyline most people only dreamed about. Yet even as he looked out across Manhattan, he couldn't shake the feeling that the city was moving without him, that he was watching life through glass instead of living it. Colleagues admired him. Competitors respected him. His bosses trusted him with responsibilities that other men his age could only dream of. Promotions came quickly, and the paychecks matched the pace. On paper, Adrian was everything a young professional was supposed to be, but at night, when the lights of the city glittered against his apartment windows, silence filled the space around him. His home was beautiful. Sleek furniture, expensive art on the walls, everything carefully chosen to project success. Yet it felt less like a home and more like a museum of what he had earned. Empty, polished, and cold. Adrian had learned to bury the emptiness beneath constant motion. If he wasn't at work, he was at the gym. If he wasn't at the gym, he was networking, attending events, keeping himself surrounded by noise and movement. Because when the noise stopped, the questions crept in. Was this all there was? A corner office, a paycheck, a hollow smile in the mirror? Adrian wasn't the kind of man to show weakness. He carried his confidence like armor, never letting anyone see the cracks beneath. Not his colleagues, not his friends, not even himself, if he could help it. Yet the haunting violin he'd heard on that crowded street had unsettled him. Music wasn't supposed to matter to him. Not anymore. He had left behind all those softer pieces of himself years ago, traded them in for ambition and strategy. But the sound stayed with him. A simple song from a stranger had slipped past his defenses and struck something deep within him. And in that moment, when his eyes had met Serena's across the street, the restlessness he'd tried to ignore seemed to sharpen. Adrian Hale had everything, but deep down he knew something was missing, and the life he'd built so carefully might not be enough to silence that truth for much longer. While Adrian Hale's world was built on structure, order, and ambition, Serena Vaughn lived in a very different rhythm. Her mornings didn't begin with boardroom meetings or rushing to catch a train. They began slowly, with sunlight spilling into her small apartment, brushes scattered across a wooden desk, and sketchbooks stacked high in the corner. The scent of coffee often filled the air as she leaned over a blank page, letting her imagination decide how her day would take shape. Serena was a freelance illustrator. Her art was her lifeline, her way of making sense of the world. Some days, work came easily. Commissions from clients who admired her style, requests from magazines, children's books, or even private collectors. Other days, money was tighter and the future uncertain. But Serena never let fear define her. For her, freedom was worth more than predictability. Unlike Adrian, who measured his success in numbers and promotions, Serena measured hers in moments. The smile of a child when she handed them a finished drawing. The satisfaction of seeing one of her pieces hanging in a tiny cafe gallery. The joy of capturing a fleeting feeling with ink or watercolor. Her world was smaller, quieter, and yet so much fuller. Friends often teased her for her spontaneity. She would cancel plans at the last second just to chase a sunset with her sketchbook, or to sit in a park and capture the movement of strangers passing by. But that was Serena. She believed life spoke to you in whispers, and if you didn't stop to listen, you'd miss what mattered most. She wasn't careless, though behind her free-spirited nature was a strength shaped by experience. Life hadn't always been easy for Serena. She'd faced setbacks, rejection letters, months when the bills felt impossible to pay. But through it all, she refused to compromise who she was. She believed that following her heart, even when it was difficult, was better than living a life built on someone else's expectations. Her friends describe her as radiant, not because of her beauty, though she was striking in her own quiet way, but because of the way she carried warmth into every room. Her laugh was the kind that made others laugh with her. Her kindness wasn't loud or showy. It was in the way she listened, the way she noticed details others overlooked, the way she made people feel seen. On that day in Manhattan, when the violinist played his haunting melody, Serena had been on her way to a meeting with a potential client. But when she heard the music, she stopped, as if the city had pressed pause just for her. That was who she was. Someone willing to interrupt the rush of life for beauty, even if only for a moment. And when her eyes met Adrian's across the crowd, something flickered inside her too. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, didn't even know if she'd ever see him again. But she felt it, the strange, fragile spark of two paths crossing. Serena Vaughn lived by faith in these little signs. She trusted that the universe, or fate, or whatever one chose to call it, had a way of guiding people to where they needed to be. And deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that stopping for that violinist was not an accident. The haunting notes of the violin still lingered in the air when Adrian and Serena found themselves standing only a few steps apart. For a moment, neither spoke. The city roared around them, horns blaring, footsteps rushing, conversations overlapping, but the two of them stood in a kind of silence that only they seemed to hear. Adrian glanced at her, almost curious why someone like her would stop for something so impractical. She wasn't in a rush, wasn't looking at her phone, wasn't distracted. She was simply listening. Serena, in turn, noticed him too. The tailored suit, the polished shoes, the way he checked his watch as if even standing still came at a cost. And yet, here he was, listening to the same melody. Adrian broke the silence first. "He's good," he said, nodding toward the violinist. The words felt awkward leaving his mouth, as if he wasn't used to talking to strangers this way. Serena smiled softly. "Not just good. He's telling a story. You can hear it if you listen." Her response caught Adrian off guard. For him, music had always been background noise, something to fill the silence during long nights of work. But the way she spoke about it made him wonder if he was missing something. They stood there for a while, exchanging small words until the song came to an end. Coins clinked into the violinist's case. People moved on, and so did Adrian and Serena, walking in the same direction, side by side, as though the city itself had decided to let their paths overlap. The conversation started light. Work, art, the usual questions strangers ask when testing the waters. Adrian spoke about his career, his long hours, the pressure and pace of his world. Serena listened politely, but her eyes carried a quiet doubt, as though she wasn't sure if the life he described was one worth chasing. When it was her turn, she spoke about her illustrations, about chasing inspiration, about the joy of creating something from nothing. Adrian nodded, but inside, he couldn't help but question her choices. No structure, no stability, no guarantee of tomorrow. It sounded reckless. And that was where the first subtle crack appeared. Adrian valued control. Serena valued freedom. He found security in numbers, strategies, and long-term plans. She found beauty in uncertainty, in trusting the moment, in believing that life had a way of leading you where you needed to be. Their words clashed softly, not as arguments, but as contrasts. Adrian questioned whether art could ever truly sustain a life. Serena questioned whether success meant anything if it left you feeling hollow. To anyone watching, it was just two strangers talking as they walked down a busy New York street. But beneath the surface, something deeper was unfolding. Their worlds were brushing against each other, and neither world seemed willing to bend. And yet, in spite of their differences, neither one wanted to say goodbye. When they reached the corner where their paths would normally split, Adrian hesitated. Serena smiled, her expression unreadable, and with a gentle wave, she stepped away, leaving him with a strange heaviness in his chest. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something he couldn't quite name. Something that unsettled him, and at the same time, pulled him in. For Adrian, the conversation left questions he couldn't shake. For Serena, it left curiosity she couldn't ignore. They were from different worlds, opposites, really. And yet, for reasons neither fully understood, both of them felt changed. The following days in New York looked the same as they always did. Crowds rushed down sidewalks. Yellow cabs weaved through traffic. The hum of the city never paused. But for Adrian Hale, something was different. He found himself walking past the same corner where the violinist once played. It had become part of his routine, slipping through the crowd at the end of the day, glancing toward the spot almost without thinking. But the corner was empty. No haunting music, no bow pulling across strings, no melody cutting to the noise of the city, just silence. And it was strange how heavy that silence felt. Adrian told himself it didn't matter. It was just a street musician. People came and went all the time. And yet, the absence left an unexpected hollowness inside him, like a door that had been shut too quickly. What unsettled him even more wasn't just the missing music. It was a memory of her, Serena. He had seen hundreds of faces on the streets of Manhattan, yet hers kept returning to his mind. The way she listened to the violin, as if it held the world's secrets. The way she smiled when she spoke about art, about life, about stories hidden in simple things. Adrian couldn't explain it. They had spoken only briefly, exchanged only fragments of themselves. And still, he felt her absence as if it were somehow tied to the missing violinist, as if both had slipped away at the same time. The city felt louder without that melody, louder and emptier. His days at the office blurred together, numbers, deadlines, endless meetings. At night, he stared out at the glittering skyline from his apartment windows, but even the lights looked colder than before. One evening, after another long day, Adrian wandered near Central Park. He wasn't searching for anything, or at least that's what he told himself. But then he saw her. Serena sat at a quiet cafe tucked against the edge of the park, sketchbook open, pencil moving lightly across the page. Her head was tilted in concentration, golden hair falling across her face. The sight of her, so focused, so unguarded, stirred something inside him he hadn't felt in years. It was as if fate had intervened, returning what the city had briefly taken away. The music was gone, but here she was. Adrian hesitated at the cafe door, caught between a man he had always been, calculated, cautious, controlled, and the pull of something deeper, something he didn't yet understand. When she looked up and noticed him, her eyes widened in recognition. And just like that, the heaviness he had been carrying began to lift. The violinist's absence had left him restless, searching. But finding Serena again felt like a spark reigniting, a quiet reminder that sometimes, When something disappears, it's only to make space for what truly matters to appear. When Adrian stepped into that quiet cafe and Serena's eyes met his, it was as though the noise of New York melted away. What were the chances, in a city of millions, that they would cross paths again? Some would call it coincidence. Serena, with her quiet belief in signs, might have called it fate. Their conversation started cautiously, like two people testing shallow waters. But soon, words flowed more easily. Adrian found himself telling her about his days, the endless grind of numbers and deadlines, the unshakable feeling that even his success felt incomplete. He wasn't used to saying such things out loud. Yet with Serena, the words came naturally. She listened in a way few people ever did. Her gaze steady, her attention unbroken, as though every word mattered. And when she spoke, she shared pieces of her world too, her love for illustration, the way she lost herself in colors and lines, her belief that stories could be told without words at all. Over the next days, their lives began to overlap, not in grand, dramatic gestures, but in simple, meaningful ways. Adrian would meet her at that same cafe after long hours at the office, watching her sketch while he let the tension of his day fade. Sometimes, they walked together through Central Park, Serena pointing out little details he had never noticed before, the curve of a tree branch, the way the evening light danced across the lake, the laughter of strangers passing by. For a man who had built his life on structure and speed, these moments felt unfamiliar and intoxicating. Serena opened a window to a world Adrian had almost forgotten, a world where beauty wasn't the closing of a deal or the weight of a paycheck, but in pausing long enough to feel. She teased him gently about his constant watch checking, told him he was too afraid to be still. He would smirk, deny it, but deep down, he knew she was right. And Adrian, in turn, brought something steady into Serena's life. She had always floated from one moment to the next, guided by instinct. But his determination, his drive, his belief in pushing forward inspired her in ways she hadn't expected. For all their differences, they began to balance one another, her spontaneity against his structure, his focus against her freedom. One evening, as they sat on a park bench, Serena pulled out her sketchbook and quietly began to draw. Curious, Adrian leaned closer. She had captured him, not as a confident, suited man he showed the world, but softer, more vulnerable, the way she seemed to see him. It unsettled him at first, to be seen so clearly, but when she looked up and smiled, he felt something stir inside him, something more than curiosity, something more than friendship. Still, beneath their growing closeness, there was an unspoken tension. Adrian's life was a machine of ambition, always pulling him forward, demanding more. Serena's was fluid, unpredictable, guided by heart. They laughed together, learned together, discovered each other in ways neither had expected. But somewhere in the background, the question lingered. Could their worlds truly fit together? For now, they didn't ask. For now, they simply let the connection grow, fragile and beautiful, like a flower blooming through the cracks of a city sidewalk. And though neither of them said it, both knew it. Something real was beginning. The weeks that followed seemed to pass in a blur. For the first time in years, Adrian's life felt alive in ways he hadn't thought possible. He laughed more. He noticed details he used to overlook. The colors of a sunset, the rhythm of footsteps along the pavement, the comfort of silence shared with someone who understood him. And at the center of it all was Serena. But life has a way of testing the fragile things we cherish most. One morning, in the gleaming glass office tower that had always defined his world, Adrian was called into a meeting. His superiors praised him, his sharp instincts, his unrelenting drive, his results. Then came the offer, a promotion, not just any promotion, but a chance to oversee the firm's international division, the kind of opportunity most people spent their lives chasing. It was everything Adrian had worked for: power, prestige, wealth, recognition. But there was a cost. The position was overseas, a move that would mean leaving New York and leaving Serena. That night, he told her. They sat together in a cafe where so much between them had begun. The warm glow of the lights contrasted sharply with the heaviness in the air. "I was offered something big," he said, trying to sound calm, though his voice carried the weight of the decision. "It's the kind of role I've been aiming for, but it's not here. It would mean relocating. Europe. Months, maybe years away." Serena's smile faltered, her eyes searching his. "And you're thinking of taking it?" He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, she already knew. For Serena, it wasn't just about distance. It was about choice, about the truth she feared from the beginning, that his world would never have space for her. That ambition would always come first, and she would always be left behind. Her voice was soft but steady. "Adrian, I can't be another thing you put aside. I can't compete with your career." He tried to explain, to tell her that it wasn't about choosing one over the other, that maybe they could find a way, but the words rang hollow. Even he didn't believe them. She closed her sketchbook, tucking it under her arm. "I've always followed my heart, but you're afraid of yours." Then she stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked away. Adrian didn't stop her. He couldn't. In the days that followed, the city seemed colder, the streets louder. Even in his polished office, surrounded by success, Adrian felt an emptiness clawing at him. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted, yet without her, it all felt meaningless. For the first time, Adrian Hale, the man who had built his life on control, was confronted with the one truth he couldn't calculate. Success meant nothing if it came at the cost of love. And as the date of his departure drew closer, the question weighed heavier and heavier. Which mattered more, ambition or the woman who had awakened a part of him he thought no longer existed? The night of Adrian's departure arrived. His bags were packed, his ticket printed, and the life he had built so carefully stood at the edge of change. From the outside, it was everything he had ever wanted. Prestige, power, the promise of a future most could only dream of. But inside, he felt only silence. As the city lights shimmered through his apartment window, Adrian realized how hollow it all was. The apartment, sleek and perfect, felt empty. The promotion, once a symbol of victory, now felt like a sentence. And the one thing that had brought color to his world, Serena, was nowhere near. He stepped outside, suitcase in hand, ready to make his way to the airport. But then something stopped him. A sound. Soft, faint, but unmistakable. The music of a violin. It drifted through the night air, weaving its way between the streets of Manhattan. That same haunting melody that had once made him pause. The same music that had brought him and Serena together. Almost without thinking, Adrian followed it. His footsteps quickened as the notes grew clearer. Turning a corner, he found the source. The violinist had returned, bow gliding across the strings beneath the glow of a street lamp. And there, standing in the small crowd that had gathered, was Serena. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even aware of him yet. She simply stood there, still and quiet, listening with her whole heart, just as she had that first night. In that moment, clarity struck Adrian harder than any boardroom victory ever had. He didn't want to leave. Not for money, not for status, not for ambition. Because what was success if it meant losing the one thing that made life worth living? He let the suitcase fall at his side and stepped toward her. "Serena." She turned, surprised, her eyes widening as she saw him standing there. For a second, neither spoke. The music filled the silence between them, carrying all the words they hadn't said. Then, Adrian's voice broke through, steady but vulnerable. "I was wrong. I thought ambition could fill the emptiness inside me, but it never did. You did. I don't want the promotion. I don't want the life they're offering me. I want you." Serena's eyes softened, glistening in the streetlight. She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for the man who always put logic before feeling. But all she saw was truth. Slowly, she stepped closer. "Are you sure, Adrian? This choice, it changes everything." He shook his head. "No, you changed everything." And then, beneath the hum of the city, under the glow of that street lamp, with the violinist's haunting melody wrapping around them, Adrian and Serena kissed. Not the fleeting spark of strangers, but the steady, undeniable connection of two souls finally choosing each other. The crowd clapped for the violinist, but for Adrian and Serena, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt what true success really meant. Not wealth, not power, not ambition, but love, connection, the courage to stop running and simply be present. New York went on as it always did. The streets stayed crowded, the lights kept burning, and the city's rhythm never slowed. To the millions rushing past, Adrian and Serena were just two more faces in the crowd. But to them, everything had changed. Adrian had spent his life chasing numbers, titles, and recognition. He believed success was something measured by what others saw, by what he achieved on paper. Yet in the end, it was a fleeting melody and the presence of one woman that revealed the truth he had been running from. Serena, who had always trusted the pull of her heart, had shown him what it meant to stop, to listen, to feel. She believed in moments that others overlooked, and it was in one of those moments that their story began. The Violinist music became more than sound. It became a reminder that life isn't meant to be lived at full speed, chasing after things that never fill the emptiness inside. Sometimes, the most important moments are the ones when we stand still. Adrian chose differently that night. He chose love over ambition, connection over control, presence over pressure. And in making that choice, he discovered a success greater than any promotion could offer. Because in the end, success isn't about wealth or status. It isn't about how fast you climb or how high you rise. True success is measured by the love you hold, the people you share it with, and the courage to choose what truly matters when life forces you to decide. For Serena, it was proof that following her heart had led her exactly where she was meant to be. For Adrian, it was the moment he finally understood that the life he was building was never about money or power or recognition. It was about this, standing beside someone who saw him for who he was, not who he pretended to be. And maybe for all of us, that is the lesson hidden in their story, that sometimes we need to pause in the middle of our busy lives, listen to music playing quietly in the background, and notice the people standing beside us. Because those are the moments, the unexpected, fragile, fleeting moments, that can change everything. So the next time you hear a song drifting through the streets or catch a stranger's glance that lingers longer than it should, remember, life has a way of weaving stories when we least expect it. The question is, will you be moving too fast to notice? Or will you stop, listen, and let yourself feel? That choice, just like Adrian's, is what defines a life you truly live. Sometimes one moment can change an entire life. For Adrian, it was stopping to listen. For Serena, it was choosing to believe. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, your home for stories that stay with you long after they end.